Have you ever imagined someone mourning the death of a baby who never existed? This isn't a tragic metaphor. It's not a medical mistake. This is a deliberate lie, meticulously crafted with emotional precision. A fake pregnancy, a supposed premature birth, and a heart-wrenching funeral, all orchestrated to manipulate. A coffin was purchased. A ceramic urn was selected. A crowdfunding page was launched. And while people cried, donated, and prayed, the coffin remained empty. The child never took a breath because he was never real. It all began in a quiet town in Pennsylvania, where Jessica Morgan, a 26-year-old woman with no prior criminal record, claimed to be experiencing every mother's nightmare. Her story spread fast, shared on Facebook, reposted in local support groups, and even featured by a small local paper. The loss of baby Noah, according to her posts, was a cruel act of fate. Sympathy poured in. Strangers offered flowers, support, and donations. But the truth was far darker. This wasn't the story of a grieving mother. It was a cold, calculated, emotional con. Jessica and her husband Daniel Morgan had used a reborn doll, a hyper-realistic replica of a newborn, to simulate the child's short life. With lifelike skin tones, weighted limbs, and even visible veins, the doll was indistinguishable from a real infant in photographs. This doll wasn't just a toy, it was the core prop of an elaborate fraud. The Morgans used it to fake memories, stage nursery photos, and extract empathy. What should have been a comforting object for trauma survivors became the centerpiece of a lie that shook an entire community. But what could drive someone to orchestrate such a cruel deception? How do you sustain a lie so deeply entwined with human grief? And why choose something so extreme, something involving a child's death? As we peel back the layers of this disturbing case, you'll see how easy it can be to fall for a tearful story, and how devastating it is to discover that the pain you supported never truly existed. This is not fiction. This is the real-life case of the Morgans and the baby that never breathed. In early 2019, Jessica Morgan began posting regularly on her social media accounts, announcing her pregnancy with overwhelming emotion. Her posts included ultrasound images, photos of her growing belly, and long captions filled with dreams for her future child, whom she had already named Noah. Her followers celebrated each milestone with her, every trimester, every small update. Her story seemed genuine, moving, and deeply relatable. Those close to her claimed that Jessica spoke about Noah as if she could already feel him breathing in her arms. Alongside Jessica, Daniel Morgan took part in the performance. The couple documented everything: the baby shower decorations, the tiny clothes folded neatly in drawers, the pastel blue walls of Noah's nursery. They even shared a photo of a teddy bear with the caption, "Waiting for you, little one." For months, it all seemed too touching to question. And that's precisely what made the scam so effective. They knew exactly which emotional chords to strike. The more intimate the posts became, the harder it was for anyone to doubt them. When people noticed that Jessica wasn't attending public events or meeting up with friends, she explained it away with medical complications. "High-risk pregnancy," she said. "I've had trauma before." Those explanations made the story even more painful, more real. No one wanted to press a grieving mother-to-be for proof. Her seclusion only added to the emotional depth of the narrative, reinforcing the illusion of fragility, vulnerability, and sincerity. The lie wasn't just believable, it was protected by silence and empathy. Then one morning, Jessica posted a heart-wrenching update. Noah had been born prematurely. Just 3 days later, she announced he had passed away in the hospital. The online response was immediate and overwhelming. Condolences flooded the comments. People changed their profile pictures to candles. Entire communities mourned a baby they had never met and who, in reality, had never existed. What started as a fabricated pregnancy now transformed into a wave of collective grief. The Morgans had not only built a fake life, they were now profiting from its death. Just days after announcing Noah's death, Jessica Morgan launched a GoFundMe page titled, "Help Us Lay Our Baby to Rest." The description was carefully crafted to stir sympathy. "No parent should ever have to bury their child," she wrote. "Please help us create a memorial for our little angel." Within hours, donations began to pour in. Friends shared the link. Strangers posted prayers. Local churches passed it along in newsletters. In less than a week, Jessica and Daniel had collected nearly $2,000. But the money wasn't going toward a funeral. It was going into their pockets. With the funds, the couple purchased a decorative urn, flowers, and even hired a photographer to take staged photos of the reborn doll in a small white gown, lying peacefully in what looked like a hospital crib. These images were shared as Noah's final moments, meant to inspire even more donations. Jessica posted emotionally charged updates, describing how she kissed her son goodbye, how she held his hand as he took his last breath. The illusion was sustained through emotional detail, details that most people wouldn't dare question. The Morgans didn't stop at online fundraising. They accepted in-person donations too. Sympathetic neighbors left money in envelopes at their doorstep. A local bakery hosted a charity bake sale to help with hospital bills. A church offered to organize a memorial service. The web of deception continued to grow, fed by the compassion of people who believed they were supporting grieving parents. Every kind word, every dollar, every tear, all rooted in fiction. The more people gave, the deeper the lie dug itself into the fabric of the community. But deception has a way of unraveling, especially when it's built on emotional exploitation. Some neighbors began to whisper, why hadn't anyone seen Jessica's belly in real life? Why didn't the hospital announce the child's death as they often did in close-knit communities? A few people asked questions, but they were met with more tears, vague answers, and emotional pleas for privacy. It worked for a while. But the more questions arose, the more the Morgan story began to crack. And once the community started digging, the truth was impossible to hide. It started with whispers, then turned into quiet suspicions, and finally erupted into confrontation. A neighbor who had known Jessica for years began to ask questions no one else dared to voice. She had never seen Jessica visibly pregnant. No swollen belly, no prenatal visits, no signs of a baby on the way. The woman finally confronted Daniel on the front porch, asking to see Noah's death certificate. He hesitated, fumbled with words, and eventually said they were waiting on paperwork. The answer only deepened the doubt. Within days, someone filed an anonymous report to GoFundMe. The platform responded quickly, freezing the fundraiser and launching an internal investigation. Meanwhile, a local journalist who had initially shared the Morgan story began digging into hospital records. She contacted 2 major medical centers in the area and discovered something alarming. Neither had any record of a premature birth or a deceased infant named Noah. No mother named Jessica Morgan had been admitted on the dates she claimed. These findings, combined with the growing online skepticism, triggered a full police inquiry. When authorities arrived at the Morgans' house, they were met with polite cooperation. But inside, they found the truth staring back at them from a crib in the corner of the nursery. The reborn doll lay swaddled in a soft blanket, meticulously placed to look like it was simply sleeping. But this wasn't a grieving home. It was a crime scene built on deception. The doll had realistic skin, rooted eyelashes, a painted birthmark, and even a faint scent of baby powder. It was an expensive, handcrafted object, designed to resemble life down to the last detail. Under questioning, Jessica and Daniel Morgan broke. The illusion they had spent nearly a year building came undone in minutes. They confessed there was no pregnancy, no birth, no baby. It had all been orchestrated for financial gain. The photos, the posts, the nursery, they were part of a meticulously scripted performance. For the investigators, the confession was disturbing not just for its content, but for the lack of emotion. The couple showed little remorse. They hadn't just committed fraud, they had violated something sacred. They had weaponized grief. The moment the truth surfaced, the sympathy that once surrounded the Morgans turned into collective outrage. People who had cried for Noah, prayed for Jessica, and donated what little they could, now felt deeply betrayed. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was emotional. "I mourned a baby that never existed," one woman wrote on Facebook. "I lit a candle for a lie." Many in the community experienced a personal kind of grief, not for the child, but for having their empathy exploited. They hadn't just been scammed, they'd been emotionally violated. Support groups for grieving mothers felt the sting especially hard. Several members said they couldn't sleep after learning the truth, describing the deception as a mockery of real pain. These were women who had buried actual children, who had lived through unbearable silence and hospital goodbyes. Jessica's lie had torn open old wounds and planted a sense of disgust. Some even questioned their participation in future online groups, unsure if they could ever trust again. The Morgans had not just fooled strangers, they had shaken the foundations of genuine grief communities. GoFundMe responded swiftly, issuing a public statement confirming that all donors would be reimbursed in full. They also announced that Jessica and Daniel would be permanently banned from the platform. Local media outlets, which had once written empathetic articles about the grieving couple, now ran headlines filled with words like deceit, manipulation, and emotional theft. The public's faith in charitable campaigns took a serious blow. Some community members even launched their own investigations into other GoFundMe pages, worried they too were built on lies. For law enforcement, the nature of the crime posed a moral challenge. While no physical harm was done, the psychological impact was undeniable. One detective in a press conference said, "It's rare to see a crime where the currency isn't just money, it's emotion. They stole people's time, their care, their hope." And that's what made this case so unique. It wasn't a robbery in the traditional sense. It was a hijacking of human compassion. In the aftermath, the town didn't just feel duped, it felt used, and that left a scar far deeper than any financial loss. Jessica and Daniel Morgan were formally charged with fraud, criminal conspiracy, and misappropriation of funds. Though they were not considered flight risks and were released pending trial, the courtroom quickly became a space for public catharsis. Journalists filled the benches. Supporters of real grieving families came holding signs that read, "Grief is not a game." During the first hearing, the judge looked directly at Jessica and asked, "Do you have any idea how many real mothers would give anything to undo their tragedies?" Her silence was chilling. Not a single tear, not a word of apology. The defense argued that Jessica suffered from a dissociative disorder rooted in unresolved maternal trauma. They portrayed her as fragile, confused, and manipulated by emotional delusions. Daniel, they claimed, simply went along out of loyalty and fear. But the prosecution had something more. Compelling digital records, text messages between the couple clearly outlined each step of the plan, from fake ultrasounds to donation targets. The language used wasn't confused or desperate, it was methodical, cold, intentional. This wasn't a mental break, it was a blueprint. The sentence, while not long in terms of incarceration, carried symbolic weight. The Morgans were ordered to repay all donations in full, perform 1,000 hours of community service in child grief support centers, and attend mandatory psychological counseling. But perhaps more damaging was what they couldn't repay: the shattered trust, the reopened wounds, the deep disillusionment left in their wake. The community didn't want revenge. They wanted acknowledgement. But none came. Jessica and Daniel avoided eye contact. They stood like statues in front of the families they had emotionally robbed. The case made headlines not just in Pennsylvania, but across the country. University psychology programs began referencing the case in lectures about symbolic manipulation and emotional fraud. News outlets ran features with titles like "The Baby Who Never Existed" and "When Compassion is Weaponized." It was no longer just a local crime. It had become a national warning, a symbol of how easy it is to deceive in the age of digital vulnerability and how devastating the consequences can be when lies are wrapped in the image of innocence. The reborn doll used by Jessica Morgan wasn't a random prop. It was an artistic creation, crafted with painstaking detail by a specialized doll artist. Its features were hauntingly lifelike: delicate veins, soft hair, tiny fingernails, and a realistic newborn weight. The artist, unaware of the Morgans' intentions, was devastated upon discovering her work had been used in a fraudulent narrative. She had designed the doll for therapeutic use, not as a tool of manipulation. What was meant to bring comfort to those grieving became the centerpiece of an emotional crime. In the United States, the reborn doll industry is vast, legitimate, and surprisingly emotional. Many who purchase these dolls are mourning mothers, elderly individuals battling loneliness, or collectors drawn to the artistry. But after the Morgans case made national headlines, a darker conversation began. Could these hyper-realistic objects be exploited to deceive? Should there be systems in place to regulate their use? Online forums and Facebook groups erupted in debate, with many artists now requiring IDs or adding disclaimers when selling to new buyers. Some manufacturers began embedding microchips or serial numbers to track authenticity and ownership, hoping to prevent their creations from being used maliciously. Ethical debates spilled into mental health circles too. Therapists who previously recommended reborn dolls for coping began reassessing risks, especially in the digital age where a photo can fabricate entire lives. What once seemed harmless, an emotional outlet, now carried a new layer of moral complexity. The line between comfort and illusion had been crossed in the most public and damaging way. In the end, the doll itself became more than an object. It became a symbol, a physical reminder that even the most innocent-looking things can be twisted into instruments of deceit. Noah never existed, but the pain his image caused was real. That's the cruel irony. The reborn doll was created to help people process grief. Instead, it created it. The Morgans story leaves us with one final truth. In a world overflowing with images and emotion, sometimes the most dangerous lies are the ones that look the most innocent. Not every tear is real, and not every tragedy is true. If this story disturbed you, and it should, then do something simple but powerful. Leave a like. It helps this video reach more people who need to hear the truth. Comment below. Have you ever witnessed a lie online that felt real? Your story might be the warning someone else needs. And of course, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell, because the next story we tell might be even darker than this one. Stay aware, stay human, and remember, sometimes the cruelest lies wear the kindest faces.